you ever have one of those days where everything depends on one moment, where if you mess up, if you're just a few minutes late, it all comes crashing down? That was the kind of day I was having, the day I found the shortcut. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't chasing ghosts or digging into something cursed. I just wanted to make it to a meeting on time. That's it. But I guess that's how it starts for most people, isn't it? A small choice, a tiny detour, a wish made without thinking. And sometimes that's all it takes. They say time is money, but I learned something different. Time is hunger, and when it's hungry enough, it eats everything. This is my story, and if you're smart, you'll never take the shortcut. I used to think bad luck came in threes. That day, it came all at once: traffic deadlines, and a damned watch that wouldn't stop ticking in my pocket. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday. I had a meeting that could make or break my job. My boss had said it 3 times that week: be there on time or don't bother coming in tomorrow. No pressure, right? The city was choking with traffic. Rows of cars stretched endlessly across the freeway, shimmering under a hot, colorless sky. I'd been sitting still for 30 minutes, and the meeting started in 15. I glanced at the gift my wife had handed me. That morning, a silver pocket watch, old and heavy, the kind you'd see in a museum. She said it had belonged to her grandfather. He swore it brought him luck, she told me with a smile. He always said it helped him get where he needed to be. I laughed when she said it. But sitting there, watching time leak away, I didn't feel like laughing. 3:15 p.m., 15 minutes to get across half the city. Impossible. I opened my GPS again, hoping traffic had eased up. The screen flickered once, twice, then loaded a new route. A back way, cutting through some older blocks I'd never driven through. According to the map, it would get me there just in time. It didn't make sense. I knew the area. There shouldn't have been any direct road. But desperation does strange things to judgment. I took the exit. The horns behind me screamed in protest, but I didn't care. The ramp curved downward, narrowing between 2 tall brick walls. I remember thinking how quiet it was, how the sound of traffic faded almost instantly. The GPS still glowed faintly on my dash, guiding me deeper. The streets I entered looked ancient narrow lanes, lined with soot-stained brick windows, boarded or broken signs, rusted to illegibility. I didn't recognize a single building. And yet, it was still the middle of the city. The further I drove, the more I realized I hadn't seen another car for minutes. No pedestrians, no stray cats, nothing. Just empty roads and a steady, suffocating silence. Then the GPS froze. The little blue dot stopped moving. I tapped the screen, smacked the side of my phone like an idiot. The display didn't change, just that tiny blue circle pulsing in place. I looked up again and frowned. The road had gotten narrower. The alley stretched endlessly ahead, a corridor of brick closing in on both sides. I kept going, trying to tell myself I could turn back any time. But when the first scraping sound came, the squeal of my side mirror brushing the wall, I knew I'd gone too far. I stopped the car and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, like a lid sealing over me. I stepped out, and the air hit me. It smelled like rust and damp stone, like basements that haven't been opened in decades. The light above seemed dimmer somehow, not cloudy, just thinner. The alleyway stretched ahead, narrowing until the buildings almost touched at the top. I could see far down a sliver of light that might have been an opening, or maybe just my eyes playing tricks. I checked my phone again. No signal. I thought about reversing the car, but one glance back made my stomach tighten. The road behind me didn't look the same. It wasn't wider like it should have been. It looked identical to the path ahead. No curve, no exit ramp, just more of the same suffocating brick corridor. I told myself I must have turned around without realizing, but my car was pointing forward. I hadn't moved. The air felt heavier now, sticky against my neck. The smell stronger. I started walking, hoping to find an open store or a cross street. The sound of my footsteps echoed too clearly, like the alley was empty for miles. Each building I passed was dead. Windows cracked, doors bolted or warped. Trash piled high, faded to colorless gray labels worn away. Everything looked abandoned for years, decades maybe. The watch in my pocket felt heavier. When I checked it, the glass had cracked. The hands were frozen at 3:26. I slipped it back into my pocket, breathing harder now. My heartbeat sounded loud in that silence. I turned to look back at my car again. It was gone. The alley was straight, no turns, no corners, but my car wasn't there. That was the first time I felt real fear. The kind that doesn't shout or run. The kind that just settles inside you, cold and certain. Somewhere above me, a window creaked, then closed, and the street fell silent again. I told myself to keep moving, that maybe I'd looped around somehow, that this was all some weird old section of the city. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The city doesn't just change shape. Roads don't disappear behind you. And yet, as I walked deeper, each step carried me further away from anywhere I knew. At first, I tried to stay rational. Cities have weird corners, forgotten industrial blocks, half-demolished housing projects, places no one goes anymore. That's what I told myself. But even lies stop working when the air itself starts to feel wrong. The walls on either side of me were closing in, or maybe I was imagining it. The farther I walked, the narrower the space became. My shoulders brushed rough brick every few steps. The sound echoed too loudly, as if the alley were a tunnel carved through something hollow. The silence had weight to it. No birds, no distant traffic. Even the wind had stopped. I pulled out my phone again. No bars, no Wi-Fi, just the same frozen blue dot, pulsing like a heartbeat. I laughed under my breath, a nervous shaking sound that died instantly in the air. The watch in my pocket ticked once, just once, and stopped again. I don't know why, but that single tick made my stomach turn. I looked ahead and saw a faint split in the alley, two narrow paths veering off in opposite directions. I could have sworn the street had been straight a minute ago. I turned left. The passage twisted, curving in impossible ways. The geometry didn't make sense one moment. I was walking downhill the next. I was climbing, even though the ground was flat. The brick walls shimmered darker towards the edges, as though the alley stretched farther than it should. I tried to mark my way scratches on the wall with my car key, but when I looked back, the marks were gone. After what felt like 20 minutes, I stopped to check the time again. 3:26 p.m., exactly the same as before. That's when I realized it wasn't just the alley that had stopped, it was time itself. My breathing got heavier. I could hear it bouncing off the walls, too close, too loud. I turned in a slow circle, scanning every surface, every shadow. The bricks seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, patterns, changing windows, appearing and vanishing. The alley wasn't a street anymore. It was a maze. I started running. Not fast, just enough to move to feel like I was doing something. The turns came quicker now, branching and twisting. Sometimes I'd see the same graffiti twice, sometimes the same pile of trash, sometimes my own footprints in the dust. That's when I knew I wasn't walking in circles, I was being redirected. The air pressed closer. Every breath stung. My chest felt tight, like the oxygen was running out. I stopped beside a broken door, its handle rusted clean through, and leaned against it. That's when I heard something behind it. A sound like movement, soft, slow, almost careful. At first, I thought it might be an animal, a rat maybe. But the sound was heavier, something dragging against the floor. I stepped back. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. It was like the whole alley was waiting. Then, from somewhere far down the corridor, a faint scraping started a dry, hollow drag like metal on stone. I froze. It stopped when I did. I turned toward the noise, squinting into the dark. The alley seemed longer now, stretching out endlessly into a point. The light was fading, though I couldn't tell where the sun was anymore. Another scrape. Closer. This time, I didn't wait. I ran. My footsteps echoed like gunshots in that dead silence. Every turn I took looked the same red brick, cracked pavement, no sky. It didn't matter which direction I chose. The sound followed, always behind me, never rushing, just there. When I finally stopped again, I realized I'd reached a dead end. A solid wall, no door, no exit. The dragging stopped too. I turned around slowly, my lungs aching, my pulse hammering in my ears. The alley behind me was empty, completely empty, and yet I could feel it there, something just around the corner, waiting for me to move. I took one step forward. The sound came again. Another step, it stopped. It was mimicking me. I remember whispering to no one, "This isn't real." But the wall behind me pulsed, just slightly, like it was breathing. The bricks pushed outward for a fraction of a second, then settled back into place. That's when I dropped the phone. It hit the ground face down, and for a brief moment, the reflection in the screen showed two silhouettes standing there, mine and something taller. When I looked up, there was nothing. Only the maze stretching on, and the ticking of that damned watch starting again. I don't know when I stopped pretending I'd find a way out. At some point, the idea of escape became meaningless. The maze had no beginning, no end, just shifting walls, and that terrible sound that followed no matter how fast I moved. Every step echoed differently now. The air was denser, heavier, almost alive. The faint smell of rot had turned metallic, like iron and damp rust. Sometimes I could taste it when I breathed. I tried to convince myself it was all a panic attack. Maybe I'd blacked out behind the wheel crashed, and this was my brain dying in real time. But the pain in my legs felt too sharp, the exhaustion too real. I slowed my pace and pressed my hand against the nearest wall to steady myself. The bricks were warm. Not from sunlight, there wasn't any, but from something pulsing behind them, faint and rhythmic, like the beat of a massive heart. That was when I heard it again. The shuffling. It started softly, just a few feet behind me. Not footsteps, something dragging. I turned. Nothing. The alley behind me stretched empty, swallowing the light. I waited, straining to hear over the sound of my own breathing. Shuffle, pause, shuffle. It was closer this time. "Hello?" My voice cracked, thin and weak. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then a whisper of air brushed the back of my neck, just enough to make the hairs stand up. I spun around again, heart pounding. The shadows seemed to bend, curving in unnatural ways, like the walls were leaning closer to listen. I took a few steps backward. The sound followed, exactly in time with me. I stopped breathing for a moment, holding completely still. The world went dead quiet. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, the blood roaring in my ears. Then scrape. It was right behind me. I bolted. The maze seemed to react to my panic, twisting, narrowing, opening again. The walls bent inward, like they wanted to close around me. My footsteps thundered against the concrete, the echoes bouncing back at me from all directions. I couldn't tell where I was going. I just knew I had to move. The shuffling turned frantic, faster, uneven. It wasn't walking, it was chasing. At the next turn, I glanced back just for a second, and that's when I saw it. A hand, long, thin. The skin gray and slick, stretched too tightly over bone. Its fingers scraped along the ground, pulling something enormous around the corner behind me. I didn't wait to see the rest. I ran harder than I've ever run in my life. Every turn I took, it followed slower but deliberate, like it didn't need to hurry. Like it knew I couldn't escape for long. The air thickened. Each breath burned. I stumbled once and caught myself on a wall, my palm pressing into something soft. I jerked my hand back and saw that it was wet. The wall glistened where I'd touched it, leaving streaks that looked black under the faint light. I kept running. At one point, the path opened slightly, revealing a row of doors on either side. Every one of them was sealed shut. Some had chains, others were bricked over. One had words carved into the wood, but the letters were faded and smeared. I thought it said, "Run." I didn't need the reminder. The sound behind me was getting louder now, more than one set of movements maybe. I couldn't tell if it was echoes or if there were others. The air vibrated with the rhythm of it, a terrible dragging that felt too close, too hungry. My lungs screamed, my vision blurred. Then I saw a gap between two buildings, narrow, barely wide enough for a person. I threw myself into it. The rough bricks scraped my arms, tearing my sleeves, but I kept going. The gap twisted sharply, forcing me to turn sideways and squeeze through. Behind me, I heard the thing reach the entrance. It stopped there for a moment, breathing a wet, rattling sound that didn't belong to anything human. Then it started to follow. I could hear it scraping against the walls, the sound of bones grinding on stone. The space was too tight for it to move quickly, but it was still coming. The air grew hotter, fouler, the smell of decay filling every breath I took. I didn't dare look back this time. I pushed forward until my shoulders hit another wall. A dead end. "No, no, no, no," I whispered. I turned around just as it reached me. It filled the gap completely too tall, too wide, folding itself unnaturally to fit between the walls. Its arms were wrong, bending in places they shouldn't. Its head tilted sideways, pressing against the brick, as if the skull itself was too large for its body. And its face, God, its face wasn't a face at all. Just smooth, stretched skin, where eyes and a mouth should have been. The only feature was a small slit across where its mouth should have been. And when it opened, I heard the sound I'd been running from. That awful dragging shuffle coming not from its feet, but from somewhere deep inside it. Something was moving beneath its skin. I screamed. I don't even remember deciding to. I just did. My voice echoed back at me, and for the first time, the thing reacted. It twitched, then it lunged. I don't remember how, but I managed to duck under its arm and force myself sideways through a crack in the wall. I felt my clothes tear my skin, slice open, but I didn't stop until I burst out into another alley. I fell hard onto the ground, gasping, shaking. When I looked up, the alley was empty again. No creature, no sound, no sign that anything had ever been there, except for one thing. The pocket watch lay in the dirt beside me, ticking again. Slow, deliberate, each second louder than the last. I picked it up with trembling hands. The glass face was shattered, but the hands were moving backward, ticking counterclockwise, faster and faster, until they stopped on a new time. 2:11. I didn't understand what it meant then. But later I would. Because 2:11 wasn't a time. It was a direction. For a long time, I just sat there on the cold concrete, staring at that broken pocket watch, ticking backward in my hand. It shouldn't have been moving at all. The glass face was shattered, the metal dented, and yet the steady rhythm was unmistakable. Tick, 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 like a heartbeat just beneath the surface. I wiped my shaking hands on my pants, trying to steady my breathing. Every sound I made echoed through the narrow corridor, bouncing off the brick, until it felt like the walls themselves were whispering it back. The time, or whatever it was, still read 2:11. Both hands pointing perfectly in the same direction. I turned the watch slowly, and the hands turned with it, like a compass. It was pointing. I don't know why, but in that moment, it didn't even feel strange. Nothing did anymore. The creature, the maze, the silence that swallowed, sound, they had all torn away what I thought reality was supposed to be. The only thing that felt real now was the ticking, so I decided to follow it. The alley stretched ahead, darker now. I couldn't tell if it was getting late or if the light simply couldn't reach this place anymore. The bricks were wet, the air smelled like rain and rot, though there wasn't a single drop falling. Every now and then, I'd pass a door half sunken into the ground, its frame warped and moldy, as if the buildings had been sinking for decades. I kept the watch in front of me, the arrow of its hands shifting ever so slightly as I moved. Every time I drifted off course, the ticking grew faster, louder. When I followed it exactly, it slowed to a calm, steady pulse. At some point, I realized something was missing. The maze wasn't changing anymore. Every time I looked behind me, the path stayed the same. The walls didn't shift or bend. There were no new forks or dead ends. It felt almost normal, like I'd broken free of whatever force had been rearranging this place. I wanted to believe that meant I was close to getting out, but then I heard it again. The shuffle, far away this time. Not close enough to make me run, but enough to stop me in my tracks. It echoed faintly through the narrow spaces, a rhythmic drag against stone. I clutched the watch tighter, and the ticking grew louder, as if reacting to the sound. The hands turned sharply to my left. The watch was leading me toward it. I shook my head. "No," I whispered, stepping back. Not a chance. But the ticking intensified, hammering like a pulse in my palm. It grew so loud, I could barely think, like it was inside my skull, vibrating behind my eyes. The pain was unbearable, like my bones were humming. Finally, I screamed and stumbled forward, following the sound, if only to make it stop. The alley split again, and as I turned the corner, I found something new. A wider space, maybe an old courtyard between buildings. A flickering light buzzed from a broken lamp overhead, casting everything in a pale, sickly yellow. And there in the middle of that courtyard was a car. My car. It was impossible. I had walked for what felt like hours, maybe miles. There was no way I had looped back to where I'd started. But there it was, unmistakable. The same dent in the bumper, the same parking sticker on the window. I laughed. I actually laughed. I ran toward it, fumbling for my keys. But when I got close, I froze. The driver's door was open. The seat was empty, but the inside of the car was drenched, soaked, as if someone had dragged it through a river. Water pooled on the floor mats, dripping steadily from the dashboard. The smell of rust and mildew hit me like a wall. And on the passenger seat, the watch. Another one. Identical to the one in my hand, but clean, polished new. It was ticking forward. Steady, calm, normal. I didn't understand. My mind was unraveling thoughts, spinning in loops. I stepped closer, reaching out a trembling hand to touch it. The glass face shimmered faintly under the weak light. The second I brushed my fingers against it, the ticking stopped. Everything stopped. The air froze. My breath caught in my throat. Even the distant dripping of water went silent. Then from behind me, the sound returned, not a shuffle this time, but a low, wet breathing. Slow, heavy, inhuman. I turned slowly. It was standing at the edge of the courtyard. The creature had followed me. It looked taller now, its limbs too long, its body bent at impossible angles as it pressed against the narrow opening of the alley. Its skin was pale gray, slick and glistening, like something that had crawled out of deep water. Where its face should have been was just a flat, stretched surface, but I could feel it staring at me. The watch in my hand started ticking again, wild and erratic. The other one on the seat ticked in perfect rhythm forward. And for one brief, horrifying moment, the two watches began to sync. The ticking overlapped, merging into one perfect beat that filled the air. The creature tilted its head, and I understood. The watches weren't just keeping time. They were calling it. The one I'd carried backward. The one in the car forward. 2 directions. 2 doors. And I was standing between them. The creature took one step toward me. The ground beneath my feet rippled dark water spreading across the concrete. The walls of the buildings bled shadow, dripping down to mix with the flood. I didn't think. I dove into the car, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine roared to life. The watch on the passenger seat glowed faintly, its ticking syncing with the revving motor. Outside, the thing reached out, that same long gray hand, sliding across the windshield, leaving streaks that hissed like acid. The skin sizzled against the glass, burning through. I floored the pedal. The tires screamed water, splashing up in black sheets as I tore out of the courtyard. I didn't look back, not even when the air behind me filled with a shriek that didn't sound human. I just drove. The road ahead was a blur, the maze collapsing walls folding in on themselves. For a moment, everything went white. And then, silence. I opened my eyes. I was back on the freeway. Traffic was moving. The world looked normal again. The clock on my dashboard read 3:28 p.m., 2 minutes before my meeting. When I opened my eyes, the sound of traffic was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. The honking, the distant hum of engines, even the faint rumble of a passing train. It all felt like waking up after nearly drowning. I was parked outside my office building, same spot as always. For a long moment, I just sat there behind the wheel, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Everything around me was normal, too normal. The light outside was soft, the kind of golden haze you only get on late afternoons. A couple of co-workers crossed the parking lot, laughing about something I couldn't hear. My chest hurt from breathing too hard, but the air smelled clean again. No rot, no mildew, no water. The watch lay on the passenger seat, the the new one. It looked pristine, shining faintly in the sunlight, ticking forward like nothing had ever happened. 3:28 p.m., 2 minutes to spare. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt empty, like something was still missing. Like I'd left a part of myself in that maze. I checked my clothes, still torn, still damp. My shoes left faint prints of muddy water on the pavement as I stepped out. Nobody seemed to notice. Nobody even looked my way. I remember thinking, maybe it really was just a dream. Maybe I just blacked out from stress. I told myself that over and over as I walked into the building. The lobby smelled of cheap coffee and disinfectant. The receptionist waved at me like it was any other day. Everything was fine, perfectly, disturbingly fine. By the time I reached the conference room, I'd almost convinced myself. My boss looked up from his laptop when I entered. "Right on time," he said with a grin. "Didn't think you'd make it." I forced a smile, mumbling something about traffic. He laughed, offered me a seat, and went back to his presentation. For the next 30 minutes, I sat there trying to listen, nodding when I needed to, speaking when spoken to. But my mind was elsewhere. The ticking of the pocket watch in my jacket pocket was louder than anything else in the room. No one else seemed to hear it. Every few seconds, I'd glance at the reflection in the glass wall beside me. My coworkers sat neatly in a row. Except, sometimes there was one more reflection than there should have been. A shape standing in the corner behind me, tall, thin, still. Each time I turned around, there was nothing. By the time the meeting ended, I could barely breathe. My boss congratulated me on the deal and clapped me on the shoulder, but I didn't even register what he said. I just needed to get outside, to air, to light, to noise. The sun was already setting. I hadn't realized how late it had gotten. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and reached for the pocket watch again. Its ticking had grown softer, more deliberate, like a whisper. I flipped it open. The hands were moving backward again. Not fast, slowly, purposefully. The face of the watch reflected my own eyes. But something was wrong. In the reflection, there was someone standing behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. The parking lot was empty now, long shadows stretching across the pavement. The air had gone completely still. I looked back down at the watch. The glass had cracked again, the same way it had before. But this time, beneath the crack, the metal wasn't silver anymore. It was dark, almost black, like it had been submerged in something thick and oily. I turned it over in my palm. There was an engraving I hadn't noticed before. Time gives, time takes. The letters were etched so faintly, I had to squint to see them. My heart started racing again. I looked up at the office building, and for a split second, I saw something in the reflection of the glass doors movement on the upper floors. A tall figure, pale and distorted, walking the hallways. And as I watched, every light in the building flickered off one by one from top to bottom, until the only thing left was the ticking. Tick, ticky, tick, each second louder, each second closer. I shoved the watch into the glove compartment, slammed it shut, and started the car. The radio turned on, automatically static, buzzing through the speakers. I hit every button, but no station came through, just static. And underneath it, a faint whisper. I couldn't make out the words at first, but when I leaned closer, I heard it clearly. A voice echoing in rhythm with the ticking, "You made it in time." That night, I didn't sleep. I tried. I really did. But every time I closed my eyes, the ticking started again, quiet at first, then louder, until it filled my head, like something alive. I threw the watch into my dresser drawer, buried it under a stack of old receipts and socks. But the sound seeped through anyway. I could feel it in my pulse. It wasn't ticking with my heartbeat anymore. It was ticking against it. When I finally did drift off, it wasn't to rest. It was to the maze. In the dream, I was back there. The same narrow corridors, the same smell of damp stone and decay. I could hear the shuffling again, distant but getting closer. The walls glistened like wet muscle, and the ground beneath me pulsed faintly, as if the city itself was breathing. I tried to run, but the air was too thick, too heavy. It clung to my skin like syrup. And then, I saw something ahead, a faint red light hovering at the end of the corridor. When I reached it, I realized it wasn't a light at all. It was the face of the pocket watch, cracked and glowing, its hands spinning wildly. And behind it, reflected in the glass, stood the creature. It was closer this time. Its body twitched in uneven motions, as if pulled by invisible strings. The sound of its breathing was wet and hollow, like air forced through waterlogged lungs. It raised its hand, the same grey slick limb that had reached for me before, and pressed its palm against the inside of the watch's glass from within. I woke up screaming. The watch was sitting on my nightstand, right next to me. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I didn't eat. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the thing. The ticking had stopped again, but I knew better than to trust the silence. My wife called around noon, asking how the meeting went. I told her everything was fine, my voice shaking, but she didn't notice. She mentioned her grandfather, again said she was glad his lucky watch had done the trick. Lucky. Yeah, I asked her where he'd gotten it from. There was a pause on the other end. I don't know, she said. He never told us. Just that he found it after a car accident. Said it was the reason he survived. I swallowed hard. And what happened to him? Another pause. He stopped talking about it. Then one day, he disappeared. The police said he must have wandered off. He was old. You know, old. No, he'd been taken. I thanked her, told her I loved her, hung up the phone, and immediately grabbed my keys. The office parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived. I wasn't sure why I went there, maybe to convince myself that it had really happened, that it wasn't just a nightmare stitched together by exhaustion. But when I walked through the glass doors, the air inside felt wrong, heavy, still. The lights flickered once, then twice, and then they stopped flickering altogether. The hallways looked longer than they should have been. The polished tile floors stretched into the distance, and the reflections of the overhead lights seemed to lag a half second behind my movements. I walked faster. My footsteps echoed strangely, like the sound was following just a little too slowly. When I passed the conference room, I saw the faint outline of a handprint on the glass wall. Long, thin, still wet. The same kind of mark that thing had left on my car. I backed away hard, hammering, and nearly tripped over something on the floor. My phone. I hadn't even realized I'd dropped it. The screen had cracked spiderwebbing across the surface, and through the distortion, I saw the time. 2:11. The same time the watch had shown. The same time it always showed before it came. I turned ready to run, but the hallway had changed. The doors were gone. The lights were dimmer. The walls seemed closer now. The texture different, no longer smooth and sterile, but rough, uneven. Brick. The office had become the alley again. The sound returned, the dragging shuffle. The same wet, deliberate rhythm. Closer. I clutched the pocket watch, my hands trembling. The ticking started up again, frantic syncing with the sound of my heartbeat. And I realized something. The watch wasn't cursed. It was hungry. It didn't just grant wishes, it took something in return. Time. Life. Maybe both. The shuffling grew louder. I backed up until I hit a wall. My breath came in shallow bursts. The watch's ticking grew faster, 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 until it was one continuous tone. Then silence. From the shadows, the creature emerged. It was right there, just a few feet away, towering over me. Its body shimmered in the half-light, translucent in places, as though it was made of something not entirely solid. And beneath that grey slick skin, I could see faint outlines of things moving, shapes that looked almost human, twisting, writhing, pressing outward. I saw faces, and I recognized them. My co-workers, my boss, even me. The creature tilted its head, and I realized the sound of the ticking wasn't coming from the watch anymore. It was coming from inside it. Each beat was a heartbeat. Each second, another stolen breath. I tried to throw the watch away, but my hand wouldn't move. My fingers had gone numb. The creature reached forward and pressed its palm against my chest, right over my heart. For a moment, I thought it was going to tear me open, but it didn't. Instead, it whispered, a voice like rusted metal scraping against stone. Your time is mine. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in my car. Morning light spilled through the windshield. The radio hummed softly with static. The pocket watch sat on the dashboard, gleaming, unbroken, untouched. The time read 3:28 p.m., 2 minutes before my meeting. Again, the world outside moved as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better, because when I lifted my sleeve, there was a faint outline burned into my wrist, 2 circles overlapping like clock hands pressed deep into my skin. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, a sound pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick. At first I thought I'd blacked out again. The same traffic, the same sunlight flickering through the windshield, the same nervous hum of engines idling on the freeway. It was all identical. I reached for my phone, trying to shake off the fog. 3:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the meeting, just like before. My stomach turned cold. I looked down at the passenger seat. The pocket watch was waiting for me, clean, silver, polished, ticking softly. I laughed, a short hollow sound that broke in my throat. It couldn't be real. Maybe the whole thing was a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Then I noticed the faint scar on my wrist, 2 intersecting circles, red and burned into the flesh. No dream leaves marks. I turned off the freeway again. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. The exit sign flashed by, same as before. The car behind me honked in frustration. Everything happened exactly as it had the first time. The road narrowing, the buildings darkening, the GPS flickering out. And when I looked into the rearview mirror, my car was the only one on the road. I tried to resist it. I told myself I wouldn't follow the same path. I'd stay put. I'd wait. Someone would drive by. Someone would see me. But the world didn't wait. The air began to thicken again, pressing down on me like invisible hands. The light dimmed. The smell of mildew crept in through the vents. I reached for the ignition, but the car was already off. The key wouldn't turn. The pocket watch on the seat began to tick faster. Then came the sound, the shuffling. Soft at first, somewhere far away, then closer. My heartbeat synced to it, Just like before, each tick, each drag, each step, closing the space between us. I gripped the watch in my hand and whispered, "Please, just let me go." The ticking stopped, and the second hand reversed direction. When I opened the door, I was no longer on the freeway. The city was gone. I was standing in the alley again, the endless corridor of brick and shadow. The air was colder now, thicker, as if it were trying to drown me where I stood. I started walking because what else could I do? The same turns, the same smell, the same silence that seemed to hold its breath. Every sound I made was wrong, too loud, too clear. And then halfway down the passage, I found something I hadn't seen before. A mirror. It stood freestanding in the middle of the alley, its surface fogged with moisture. The frame was ornate old, the kind of thing you'd find in an antique store. I approached it, slowly drawn in by my reflection. Except, it wasn't my reflection. It was me, yes, but not now. Older, gaunt, pale, eyes sunken. He looked terrified, and he was holding the same pocket watch. I reached out and so did he. Our hands met against the glass. The mirror rippled like water, and for a heartbeat, I felt his fingers grip mine. Then the reflection spoke. "Don't follow it." The voice was cracked, desperate, my own voice, but hollow. Before I could answer, a shadow passed behind him, tall, grey, formless. The creature. The reflection's eyes widened. "It feeds on time," he whispered. "Every wish is another life. You're just the next one." The glass shattered. I stumbled back as shards rained down around me. When I looked up, the alley was gone. I was back in my car. My phone buzzed on the dash. A notification. Meeting in 15 minutes. I looked out the window. Traffic. The same cars. The same sky. The watch ticked softly in my hand, innocent as ever. 3:15 p.m. And then faintly from somewhere behind me, I heard it. The shuffling. The same slow, deliberate steps dragging across the asphalt. Only this time, they didn't sound far away. I glanced in the rearview mirror. In the reflection of the back seat, something shifted, a long grey hand, sliding into view, resting gently on the leather. I froze. The watch ticked once more, and then stopped. Now, I'm here again. Writing this down, hoping someone will read it before it's too late. If you ever find an old pocket watch, silver-cracked glass hands that don't stay still, don't touch it. Don't wind it. Don't even look at it. Because once it starts ticking for you, it never stops. And when your time runs out, it comes to collect. Tick, tick, tick. The end. I've tried to live normally since then. I still go to work. I still drive the same route. But every day at 3:15 p.m., I hear it. The ticking. Soft, steady, patient. Sometimes it comes from my pocket. Sometimes from the walls. And sometimes from the reflection in my rearview mirror. I've stopped trying to escape. I think that's the trick. You don't escape time. You just delay it. So if you ever find a watch like mine, old and silver, ticking backwards, don't wish for anything. Because no matter what you ask for, time always takes its payment. And when the ticking stops, that's when it comes for you. Tick, tick, tick. This was my story. And if you're hearing it now, maybe it's already too late.